Question is, with ambition, is it aligned ambition or is it an ambition based out of fear? To me, it doesn't even make sense that self-awareness and ambition, learning how to be happy and ambition are at odds.
Joe Hudson is the founder of The Art of Accomplishment and executive coach to some of the biggest names in Silicon Valley. This is the second time I've had the honor of having Joe on the show, and in this conversation, we discuss the interplay between self-awareness, impact, and ambition.
What happens for a lot of folks is that they think they're valuable if they achieve, that's just a huge misery and actually stifles ambition, or this deep fear that they're not going to get the thing that they want, that they're at risk, that they can't handle things unless they get a certain amount of money or a certain amount of power or something like that. All those things will actually make your ambition less potent, and it'll make you miserable.
In Joe's view, as we deepen our self-awareness and authenticity, our ambition becomes stronger and more enduring.
Self-awareness actually deepens your ambition, because when you have that self-awareness, you find a purpose that you're going to do no matter what, and you're going to do it with joy, love, and care, and all those things make for better product, better results, better businesses, and just more ambition.
Joe shares how ambition can exist in harmony with surrendering to the flow of life.
Something that changed from the ambition before and the ambition now is there's a deep following. There's I'm listening to the river. I'm not digging levees and trying to get water from one place to another. I'm listening to the river and going where it wants me to go. And in that, I have a plan, I have goals, but all of it could be thrown up in the air if it's really clear that this is where I need to go or where the company needs to go. That's where the surrender comes in. There's a deep level of surrender, of listening to what's being asked of me rather than thinking that I have to do something to be safe or protected or secure.
In Joe's view, as we deepen our self-awareness and authenticity, our ambition becomes stronger and more enduring.
Do you ever have that moment where you can look back and I can see even all the side roads, even all the U-turns in the path, how all of them added up to what I'm doing now, how those little lessons make what I'm doing now more powerful or more useful?
Before we get into this conversation, I want to ask you to join this amazing community of consciousness explorers. This whole idea of pursuing expanded consciousness and the boundaries of human potential while living a modern life is relatively new, which is why we interview revered masters, teachers, experts, and practitioners to help you on your own journey. To stay up to date on the latest conversations, simply click subscribe below and you'll be notified each time a new episode comes out. I am so grateful for all of your support and comments. I love reading them. Now let's dive into this conversation. Well, Joe, I'm excited to have this conversation. I put the bat signal out to try to figure out what the hell we should talk about. And I have this signal group that Brett's in of 100 plus founders kind of into this whole world. And the two themes that came up from me polling that group were about ambition and impact. And I think there's this sense of people that kind of buy into a lot of things that you guys talk about at The Art of Accomplishment. But there's this also sense of well, where is the room for my ambition? And maybe I have all these things I want to do, and how does that work? And so where does ambition situate itself in The Art of Accomplishment?
Man, I love ambition. All I work with are CEOs who are deeply ambitious, and not just financially ambitious, but mission driven and ambitious. And if you look at my days, it's there's no way anybody would work the way I work if it wasn't for ambition. I think ambition is lovely. I think the question is, with ambition, is it aligned? Is it aligned ambition, or is it ambition based out of fear? That's the question. And to me, it doesn't even make sense that self-awareness and ambition, or like learning how to be happy and ambition are at odds. It doesn't even make sense to me that they would be. And I think that the question itself stems from fear. That the idea is that some way part of my personality is going to be destroyed if I really know myself, or some way in which if I see myself more clearly, I might not get the shit that I want. You know, some basic fear like that. But for me, they're just not at all. Like, I mean, Gandhi was ambitious. MLK was ambitious. You know, Mother Teresa was ambitious. Like, ambition is it's like I think I'm not sure how healthy of a human you can be without some level of ambition.
So it sounds like it really is the context of the ambition that is worth examining if people feel some type of tension or disconnect there.
Yeah, I think what happens for a lot of folks is that their ambition, like, they think they're valuable if they achieve. I think that that's just a like huge misery and actually stifles ambition, or this deep fear that they're not going to get the thing that they want, that they're at risk, that they can't handle things unless they get a certain amount of money or a certain amount of power or something like that. I think all those things will actually make your ambition less potent, and it'll make you miserable, and you'll never really find the thing that you're grasping for. And when you chase ambition in that way, you know, those are the people who like come find me at 50 years old and say like, okay, I've got everything I want, but I'm fucking miserable. And what do I do now? So I think all that matters is that there's an alignment. What I notice is that like, there's a lot of CEOs that I meet where they're just saying, okay, then I'm going to be able to do X, Y, and Z, and then I'm going to be able to sell the company, and then I'm going to be free, and then I'm going to have time for myself, and blah, 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 blah. And that's a pretty good signal that the ambition isn't entirely aligned, right? Like Tara and I we were just finished at this week-long retreat that we do called Groundbreakers, and we're exhausted after that. We're working ambitiously from from like 7:30 in the morning till 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night, every day, 7 days. Big emotional content. It is not easy work. And we're at the end of that. We are exhausted. We're sitting in the hot tub. And we were recollecting this financial move that we made, that if we would have made it differently, we would have like tens of millions of dollars more in the bank than we do. And we would have had it very early on. And I said, oh, you know, I wonder if we would, like, where we would be if we would have made that move, like what would have happened to us. And we both decided we'd still be married, that we would have weathered those storms, that money wouldn't have changed that, because we were committed to that even before, like, while, like, through everything. But we weren't clear if we would have built the business that we've built, and that's growing every year. And then that idea came to my mind, and I asked her, I said, hey, you know, would you sell the business for $1 billion if the price of it was you could never do this work again? And we both thought about it. We both exhaled like a fuck. And then we both said, no, we wouldn't sell it. We would never sell the business if that meant we couldn't do this, because it's so aligned in our purpose. Anyways, to end that story, to go out on a caveat for a minute, I came home, I told my girls the story. And like 3 days later, my youngest daughter says, I'm thinking about my $1 billion idea. And I'm like, oh, you want to make $1 billion? She goes, no, I want an idea that I wouldn't sell for $1 billion.
Wow.
Made me felt really good.
That's some wisdom right there.
Yeah. So
that's really cool.
She has that ambition, right? She has the ambition, but it's just not to make $1 billion. It's not believing that once I have money, I'll be free. It's not believing that once I've achieved this thing, I'll be valuable, or I'll see myself as valuable, or I'll be happy. It's the ambition is to do what you love and be happy and be free in the doing of it. It's just a bigger ambition.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it kind of points to having, at least for me, like, I feel like I'm starting to find that thing in my life, right? That I'm endlessly curious about, that I love doing, that I would do for free, that, I'd be pretty salty if I couldn't do. And
Yeah.
it is an emergence. It wasn't a
Yeah.
figuring out, right? It
Yeah.
was something that became clear through self-awareness that was already there. And it's why I think this work and this, I wouldn't call work, whatever you want to call it, why investing your energy in this self-awareness stuff is it's just so profoundly amazing and wonderful.
Yeah. For me, that's mine for sure. I think somebody recently asked me, I think it was on Twitter or something, where they were saying about purpose, and they were like, oh, I'm looking for my purpose. And it was an interesting thing that it really resonates with what you just said. I said the first thing is purpose is more about how you do it than it is, or just as much about how you do it as what you're doing, right? Like what I notice is that you could do anything with it with purpose. And when you do it with purpose, your actual purpose, the thing that is your purpose to do becomes like, it invites it towards you. It makes it more and more like you're going to find that thing if you're living in whatever you're doing with that purpose. And the other thing is that it feels like purpose is, you have to have the faith that it's there. It's like you're born with it. If you have faith that it's there, then it unfolds easier. It's like the nutrients for the seed. Whereas if you're like looking for it in a weird way, you're saying it doesn't exist inside of me. You feel like it has to be found. And then it's kind of a pushing of the purpose away. So what you just said totally makes sense to me, that it is like, it's an unfolding. You have faith in it, and there's an unfolding in it.
Yeah. And in many ways, when you find it, I don't know, as you started to do what you're doing, I could see how there were seeds of this when I was a kid.
Right.
There were traces, and I'm like, oh shit, and it's so funny. And I'm like, well, I see how I was doing that back then in just a very, different permutation.
Yeah. Do you ever have that moment where like you can look back? I've had these moments from time to time where I look back and I can see even all the side roads, even all the U-turns in the path, like how all of them added up to what I'm doing now, how those little lessons make what I'm doing now more powerful or more useful.
100%. Like, I feel like it's like, in order to serve in the way that I am now, I had to take the detours.
Yeah.
Like, it was a requisite. It wasn't a mistake. It was actually what was required. And there's an immense freedom in that, because you're like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I didn't fuck up. Like, I don't have to like be like, oh, I should have gotten on Bitcoin in 2012 or like whatever. Right. It's like, all right, cool. This was part of the journey, curriculum, whatever you want to call it.
Exactly.
So okay, I had this $1 billion question kind of aligns to one of the things I wanted to ask you, which also is similar to some questions that people had for you, which is, what is your why? Why are you building what you're building?
It creates just fucking an immense joy in my life. There's an evolution to it, right? Like, there was the time where I thought that I was somehow helping the world. I wanted to scale, but I'm just building Legos, man. I'm just like a little kid with Legos, happy as crap, seeing how big, how wide, what kind of intricate shit I can build with Legos. Like, I know it's supposed to be like more, profound or something, like I want to help the world, blah, blah, blah. And, and we do have a purpose in our business and a mission in our business. But if you ask me honestly, what makes me do it is that every day I have joy in the thing that I'm doing. It brings me joy to, regularly hear feedback that people's lives have changed is just like incredibly joyful. To watch people transform is joyful. To watch people transform over like now half a decade, maybe 8 years, and to watch their lives. And now they're getting married and having kids, and like how they're raising their kids, and knowing that what they've learned is going to like impact generations, like all that shit, man, that just brings me so much joy. And there's literally somebody once said to me, actually it was a CEO that I'm coaching right now, who's quite famous. And he said, great jobs, you get to do 80% of what you want to do and 20% of what you don't want to do. I was like, and he was telling me that that's what he thinks is the best you could do. I'm like, no, man, like you can totally have 100%. You can totally have 100. Like there's really literally nothing I do that I don't enjoy. And
That sounds like a great job to me.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, I own the company, so I can, and we're sharing that in the longer term vision, but I get to decide, and hopefully everybody in our business will get to decide like, oh, this is what turns me on. This is what I want to be doing. And most of their time is spent there, because that's also super productive if people are really into what they're doing.
Yeah. It's a really, I think it's a really compelling idea. I have had similar trajectories that you called out there, where it's like, oh, like what's my impact, legacy, and all this kind of stuff that I don't really find super interesting anymore. And it's kind of like, well, what if your biggest the pathway through the biggest impact is finding that thing that you just are endlessly energized by, that you love doing for the sake of doing it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that's where the durability and the creativity and the full expression and all of that comes. Like those are the conditions for the highest expression to be manifest. And I think we kind of like work backwards instead of through that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not even sure if you can do it any other way. Meaning like, I think you have to go through those permutations to be able to find it. You have to have all the like excuses that you make in your head, like scale or impact or blah, 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 to like convince yourself to do shit, and then at some point, oh, right, I don't have to convince myself to do shit anymore. It's just natural. And it's, like a lot of awakening, it's a remembering. And so, like, if you look at little kids and how they play, like that's as close to it as my life gets. Like you see kids and they're like, ooh, let's build this. Oh no, let's build this. Oh, let's take this over here and let's do that. And they're just like in the yard building stuff, doing a couple projects like that. That's my life. It's just, but it took me years and years to remember how to do that.
What do you think is the story that people tell themselves that prevent them from just doing the shit they like doing?
I think it's a reflection of the fact that most of us were parented in a way that like who we were wasn't good enough. Not that our parents were trying to teach us that, but like your sadness isn't good enough. Your anger isn't good enough. Like you're not doing this, you're not doing that. There wasn't like this faith, there was criticism, there was correction, and not to say that anybody's parents were bad, and though some of them for sure were, as far as not being good parents, but I think that's generally the thing that happens is we have to learn. Our job is to learn how to be ourselves. And as we learn how to be ourselves, as we become more authentic, we become more self-aware. This is what falls out of it. And that's why I say at the beginning that that self-awareness actually deepens your ambition, because when you have that self-awareness, you find a purpose that you're going to do no matter what. And you're going to do it with joy, and you're going to do it with love and care. And all those things make for better product, better results, better businesses, just more ambition. So your ambition actually flourishes.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. To me, it's like, I just think about all the like artificial constraints that I would put on myself before the self-awareness journey, where it's like, even if there was that ambition where I was like, all right, like I'm going to fucking do this thing, right? There was always just this stuff that got in the way of it.
Yeah.
And it was the impediments that were the thing that needed to be paid attention to.
Yeah, that's exactly how I work with folks in coaching, is that I'll coach somebody and we'll, hey, what do I have to do about sales? And we'll talk about what you have to do about sales. And maybe let's say the thing that they need to do is like, be more data driven. And then I talk to them the next week and they haven't really taken the action to be more data driven in their sales process. That's exactly the place where I'm like, oh, that's where we're going to find some gold. That's the place that we're going to find what's really going on. And maybe it's because, they don't want to look at the future because it makes them anxious. And so we have to address that. Or maybe it's about they don't want conflict with the sales leader. So we have to look about that. Or maybe it's because they know that there's a problem with the product, but they don't want to address it because it might be the end of their company. And so we have to, embrace that intensity. But it's always the places where people aren't doing the thing that they know would be good for the company, which is where you find the gold in the self-awareness. You right there is where you're going to find the most growth. That's why business is such an amazing journey.
Totally. My teacher, the first thing she said to me is just like, your only job is to notice your resistance.
Yeah.
Just notice when you're resisting shit, and you'll just be on a great path if you just keep doing that forever. So
that's a good one.
I feel that. One thing, I was re-listening to some of the, I think it was the masterclass conversations that you guys have recorded, which, by the way, I'm taking this upcoming one. Really stoked about it. Anybody who's listening can take it with me. It's going to be really fun. But you talked about how the product that you create is essentially an expression of the consciousness. Like the product is the consciousness.
Yes.
Which I found to be a very profound idea, and I would love to explore with you. So could you talk more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, sure. Like I would say, let's just say like the consciousness that created Facebook kind of created a certain superficiality or non-superficiality of interaction between humans. It's more transactional than some, and it's more, and it's more about the way it looks and less about like a deeper connection generally. So you could assume the creators of Facebook also, that's probably the level of connection that they're operating in generally. At least they were when they were creating the thing itself. Right now, at least for a while, I don't know how it is today, but OpenAI particularly would say things that it was very confident about, but was very wrong, right? Which is, psychologically speaking, very similar to the way incredibly highly intellectual people work. That if you read the studies behind it, really, really heady people, really, really smart people can convince themselves that they're right when they're wrong more easily than others and be very convinced about it. And you can see people who are highly logical, they will be very convinced that they're right when they're dead wrong. And that people around them will be convinced that they're right because they're so convinced. The other people are more empathetic and they're more convinced. And now we have a product that acts just like that, very convinced it's right when it's absolutely wrong. So those are some examples of it. You can just see it also, like it's more easy to see it in art or music. The consciousness of the artist becomes very clearly the product that we're seeing. And so I find that to be the case everywhere. And it's why, you see some of the greatest mentors of business of all time talk about like being of service is really, really important, because that allows them to be of service to the customer. That consciousness is actually transmitted in their product to being of service to the customer, which actually creates customer loyalty. That FedEx would be a great example of this. So, or the consciousness of, I forget his name, but he ran Boeing for a while before it went off the rails, and Ford for a while. And he was very much into, I want to hear all the bad news. I want to, as one of my CEOs says, open the drawer. You know, there's a kitchen drawer that you put all your shit in and nobody wants to look at it. You put your hand in, it pokes you. He's called opening the drawer. And in business, you got to look in that drawer and like figure out what's actually going on in there. And they have that as a principle, open the drawer. And he was into opening the drawer. And so when he was in the Boeing, like Boeing went without a hitch as far as like major things for years and years and years. Ford increased its quality because his consciousness was look at everything that's not working, rather than I want to hear good news and my job is to report good news. So that's all it means. It just means that the other way to say it is like a spit at the top is a waterfall at the bottom. You know, that the small action of consciousness that the CEO makes is a waterfall at the bottom. And we are reflections of our company. The same way our marriages reflect who we are, our children reflect who we are, our companies reflect who we are.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation so far. If you like what you hear, let me know by clicking like, subscribing to the channel, and responding with a comment around something that you found interesting in the conversation so far. In addition to these videos, I do a lot of writing on the exploration of consciousness and my own personal revelations in my newsletter called Consciousness, the Doorway to Human Evolution. To receive these updates and more, all you need to do is simply head to the link in the description below and you'll be added to the community of 20,000 plus consciousness explorers receiving weekly ideas and inspiration in their inbox. I look forward to hearing from you there. Now let's get back to the show. There was this crazy story that I was recounting when you were describing this, where the CEO had started this company that was basically about delivering catered lunches to people. Like that was the business. It was like catering for lunch at work. And she told me that in her own self-awareness journey, she realized that one of her deepest wounds is that no one would sit with her at lunch. And so she literally created a company to give people lunch.
Right.
And I just was like, holy shit, like this like reflection of this like literal reflection of, you know, your consciousness and like the things that we create. It is so real. So it's crazy.
Yeah. And it's why in like for me, it's really important that everybody who works with us, like why we train people for years before they can facilitate something, is because the consciousness is more important than whether people buy the product. Because my passion, my purpose isn't for people to buy the product. My passion is for people to feel that unconditional love and to be seen as whole and complete. The other, which makes me think of it makes me think of something else that's really important, which is I think that there's another reason why that question I think comes up, like what about my ambition, is that I think that there's this thing that happens in the journey when you've been ambitious and you've gotten what you wanted for a while, you start making the ambition a bad guy for a bit. Like there's a self-judgment there. And probably there's some of the question, I would say if you're asking that question about like, how does self-development or my spirituality or my personal growth or whatever the words are that you want to use, how does that make room for my ambition? I would say stop judging your ambition, like fall in love with your ambition. That would be another way to look at it.
I think that's exactly what a lot of the kind of dissonance that I've experienced it myself, and I know some other people where yeah, there's this sense of like, well, if I'm inherently whole, then like, well, what am I going to do? Like, am I just going to
Right.
sit there, like, just going to like sit there and like just hug myself all day. And,
Right.
there's this like, I'm going to lose my edge
Right.
thing, which
Yeah.
I think is like a phase for
Yeah.
recovering ambitious people.
Yeah. I think it's true. I think my metaphor is kind of like an oak tree, and I've used this before on our podcast. But like the acorn is perfect, and the sapling is perfect, and the teenage tree is perfect, and the old tree is perfect. Like part of our perfection is that we grow and evolve. But evolution, you can't fricking stop it, And so like we evolve. That's what we do, and it's part of humanity. It's part of each one of us. So to me, it's the idea that we need to, we can't love ourselves. Like there's this concept, like if we love ourselves completely, if we are satisfied with who we are, we won't grow. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. Like all life grows, all life transforms.
Well, this kind of alludes to something I saw on Twitter today where I had broadcasted that we were doing a podcast and someone asked, what is Joe's spiritual belief? Like, does he surrender to a higher power? And I'm just going to read what you responded, and then you can talk about it. I don't really have a spiritual belief. Wait,
start again. Sorry, I was laughing. Please start again.
Okay. I'm just going to read the question, then I'm reading your response. Braz, whoever that is, would love to learn more about Joe Hudson's spiritual belief. Does he surrender to a higher power life in the same way you do? And I guess he was referring to me. Joe responds, I don't really have a spiritual belief. I haven't found a belief that can hold that kind of immensity. Surrender has become somewhat of a lifestyle, but I am not the one doing it. Rather, it is being done to me. Explain.
Apparently, I was a little punchy, I guess. When
I love it.
Okay. I'll explain the first part. The idea that our thoughts can describe whatever is beyond us is really like somewhat ridiculous. Like to be able to describe God, if it's a God or the universe or anything like that, like our thoughts are like so small in comparison to the immensity of reality. So that's what I mean by that, meaning that there's to some degree, I have found that there's a hubris to thinking that I have an answer, that my belief about spirituality could be right. And so I don't really, whether there's a God or not a God, or everything is God, or there's reincarnation, that all that stuff, it doesn't make sense to me that I could be able to describe that. So to me, and also the belief in it, at least for now, the belief in it doesn't change the way that I live. However, on the second part of it, which is surrender, like the idea of faith is really important to me. The idea of surrender is really important to me. They're both practices that like create a tremendous amount of joy in my life and a tremendous amount of ease in my life. And so like I can get emotional just thinking about how important those things are to me. When it comes to surrender in specifics, I remember having this moment where I was like raising my hands together just in thanks. It wasn't for anything. And then I had this recognition that like every time that it happened, it wasn't my choice. It was something that was like it moved through me. Like the way that I would say in the next minute, you're going to have however number of thoughts, let's say 10 thoughts or a dozen thoughts. You didn't decide to have any of those thoughts. Each one of those thoughts is being done to you. You're not deciding I'm going to have this thought and then you're going to have the thought, right? The thoughts just happen. And so that's the recognition that like in some way, everything that like there's a choicelessness in everything that I do, that it's all an act of surrender. And the idea that I have control over, or that I'm choosing, is more hubris. So that's how it works in my system, which I think relates to the Lego thing. It's like the other way for me to describe, like, I'm just sitting there playing Legos and having a shit ton of fun doing, like, this is the thing that brings me joy. The other way to describe it is like, this is what's animated. I'm animated this way, and this is what's happening.
I appreciate you sharing that. I think like the thing that I was curious about was, or the thing that's kind of coming up for me as I hear you talk about this, is like, like the sapling, like you didn't need to decide to have to surrender and your next lesson and your next thing. And like, like it all is just going to happen,
Yeah.
and you didn't even need to do anything.
Yeah.
And that's just because, it's evolution. It's like, it's many ways for, I feel like sometimes my friend group and peer group is increasingly like ambition anonymous recoveries. And I feel like a lot of us just there's such a freaking peace that comes with that when you realize you don't have to chase your growth.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have what a relief.
You don't have to earn your happiness. You don't have to chase your growth. You don't, it's, exactly. As a matter of fact, like, earning your happiness, chasing your growth slows it down. I find the most efficient is gratitude for the growth. The most efficient means for growth is gratitude for the growth. Recognition and gratitude for it.
There was a time in your experience, I feel like I've heard you talk about, where you described just basically wanting to meditate all day. Like you were just like, wanted to just sit around and do that. And eventually you, I believe, had to make some money, decided that you needed to make some money for your family. And I'm curious, like, and then at some point, I'm kind of looking for you to fill in the gaps here. At some point, there was like wait a second, like, I can use this work thing and this career thing as actually my main way of developing self-awareness, or one of the main inputs. And I'm just like, I find that kind of continuum to be so interesting and so useful for understanding. And so, like, what I would love to hear is, like, what was it like when you went into the workforce, but you had been just coming off of like wanting to meditate 12 hours a day? Like, and then how did you get to the point where you're like, you know what? Like, actually, maybe my job is my meditation. My conversation with my wife is my meditation. That experience.
Yeah. So there was a natural coming to an end that was happening with I was lucky in the fact that I wasn't pushing myself for whatever reason. I was worried about money. I had other issues, but for whatever reason, I wasn't pushing myself to like get to work. Like, I didn't feel like I'd seen my dad chase money and success and where it led him. So there was nothing about me that was doing that. And while I was meditating, but there was a natural wrapping up of the meditation that was happening. And it wasn't just meditation. There was all sorts of things that I was doing, but a lot of it was meditation. And when I realized that I was making that like it was time to have a kid, I wanted to have a kid for the first time. And I was like, okay, it's time. I need to make money. I realized that unless it was in self-awareness, I wasn't going to be successful, because that was my passion. That's what drove me. I knew that. I could easily have walked out of that 7 years and said, it's not self-awareness that drives me, it's something else. Like, I know plenty of people who, after years and years of self-awareness and meditation, that isn't like they get into something like jewelry or something, like, or gem exchange or cryptocurrency, and they it's their passion, it's their purpose in the way that they're doing it. And so you can't really speak, but anyways, for me, I knew that that was the case. And so I knew that, so I became a venture capitalist and a philanthropist. So as a philanthropist for this, so I worked for this family office, and I was, I did some things, and I was doing this like video art, installation for the family, and I'd done a couple of them, and we just spoke about money, and it was during the times where like gold was going up through the roof and oil was going up through the roof. And I told them like, hey, this is what's going to happen. And you know, you could make some money on this. And they did, they made a lot of money on it. And then they asked me to come to work for them. And I said, no. And then I thought about it for a bit, and I was like, okay, I'll go to work for you. If I can do philanthropy and venture capital. And this is what I want to do for philanthropy. And for philanthropy, I wanted to work on basically reducing ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences. Like how and my thought process was teaching kids self-awareness was going to be the best way to do that. And so scaling self-awareness became something that I did from that point. So that was part of the expression of it. And I knew that that would keep me motivated, and my track record there was far greater than my track record in venture capital. We only invested in 3 or 4 different organizations, and all of them like went from serving hundreds to serving millions of people with very small budgets. And then I did environmental stuff with the venture world because I just saw that as the biggest technological change agent. But I knew that I needed to, like, all the business practices had to be practices that helped me and others become more self-aware. And so what I learned was when you do business practices like that, they just become more powerful. The practices become more powerful. So if you're selling or fundraising or building a product, and inside of that sales, there's self-discovery. Inside of that fundraising, there's self-discovery. Inside of that product design, there's self-discovery. You're going to have a better product. You're going to sell more. You're going to raise more money, or the money's going to be raised more easily. Because if you're in a sales conversation and the person you're selling to learns something about themselves, you've got a sale. The sale's done. Like if they learn something about their business, the sale is done. If somebody has an interaction with you on a fundraise and they feel like they've learned something about themselves and you've learned something about yourself, you have a friendship that you're going to raise money on that. Right. And so as examples, if you have a product that helps people understand themselves better, or the product, you understand people better, and so you design a better product, either one of those things is going to sell more of that product in that particular category. So I just learned, I was like, I know I have to make this part of it. In venture, I wasn't such a great venture capitalist. I wasn't horrible, but and then that's when the second thing happened, which was I realized, so when I say I wasn't a great venture capitalist, what I didn't realize is the most important thing as a venture capitalist is who you invest in. It's the CEO, the quality of the C-level is the most important thing. If you can identify the kind of person who's going to be successful, their business model changed, they might pivot, but they're going to figure it out. And I was not great at that. I somehow needed to be needed more than a venture capitalist. Like the best venture capitalists are the ones who are like, I don't have time. Like either you're going to float, because they pick really great people. And I did not. So I had to coach some of these CEOs to make their companies successful. So it took longer. So our returns were a little bit less than others because it took longer for these companies to be successful. But I learned how to coach. And then the rest of it just happened naturally. Then folks started referring me for coaching. All of a sudden I couldn't coach everybody. All of a sudden I'm doing a course so that I can, have an effect. And then next thing I know, I'm like, this makes me happier. So I'll take the pay cut. And then I did it. And now, it's not a pay cut. Now it's better than anything I was doing in the field of investing. So that's kind of how it progressed. the thing about it was that it wasn't a plan, it was a following, you know? So something that changed from like the ambition before and the ambition now is like, there's a deep following. There's like, I'm listening to the river. I'm not digging levees. And trying to get water from one place to another. I'm listening to the river and going where it wants me to go. And in that, like, I have a plan, I have goals, but all of it could be thrown up in the air if it's really clear that this is where I need to go or where the company needs to go. And so that's where the surrender comes in. There's a deep level of surrender, of listening to what's being asked of me rather than thinking that I have to do something to be safe or protected or secure.
What are what are the ways that river reveals itself to you? Like, how do you know which way it's winding?
That is the most difficult question. I remember when I was doing my first course, and this is not going to answer your question, unfortunately, but I was doing my first course, and this guy wanted to join the course. I wanted like one group of 12. It ended up being two groups of 14. We were doing 18 months of like meeting every quarter to work on stuff. And this guy wanted to be a part of the course. And I had phone calls from other participants saying, this guy can't be a part of it. And I invited him over to have a conversation to see what I thought about it. And my girls were like, you can't have that guy around. Like, they were like, no. Like, my daughters who were young were like, no. And my wife was like, no. And I was like, yeah, I'm sorry. It's a yes. And I was no, you know, like, me was no, but I knew that that's what I had to do. I just knew it. And so grateful I did. Such, like, the biggest gift was that person being in the mix and all the tension that he created and the learnings that came out of that tension. But and I cannot describe how I knew. I just can't describe, but I both didn't want to do it, but I knew that was the calling. I knew that was the thing. And the only thing I can say is what I notice is the more I'm able to listen to myself and to the world, other people, the more I'm able to be, the more that like presence becomes a lifestyle, the more that it's obvious when I'm being asked to do something. So I can't really tell you how I do it, but I can tell you that your own state of presence and acceptance makes it far more accessible.
That's so interesting that I could see where a lot of people would, you know, your daughter's flipping out, like other people saying bad. It's like, oh, the universe is telling me to just F this guy.
Totally.
And
that's what I was thinking too. I'm like, everybody's saying no. It must be a sign, but God damn it. Fuck. I was so upset that I had to say yes. I mean, literally, it was such a weird feeling.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. It's an interesting, experience where for me, when I heard you talk about kind of your setting for like your dials being set to presence, like for me, like what I observed is like, you know, the creativity and the intuition and kind of all that stuff is available in the stillness, and it switches your preference to the conditions for insight. You know, instead of listening to a podcast while you cook and then like just constantly doing 27 things, it's like, well, that's actually not the conditions for receiving. And so you just don't do that anymore. Cause you just find the presence more it's just like an intelligent thing, you know, it's not even it's not like some spiritual thing. It's just like, it's just there has a higher return on presence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just an ROI thing. There was something you were saying there that was, so we were talking earlier about like you're thinking about making a move and you went to different places to check them out. And like, how did you know? Like, there's a place that you're clearly called to. and you can describe it. You can be like, oh, there might be good restaurants or something like that. But there's, my guess at where you are right now, there's just a knowing. You're just like, yeah, this is the place I'm supposed to be. Your mind might be having a hard time accepting that. But
well, to be honest with you, Joe, I think what actually emerged for me from that experience was a realization of like, oh, you think something outside of you, like where you're going to live, is going to create a good experience. Like it was like it was a manifestation of that pattern, like contorted in a new way that I hadn't seen. And I was like, oh shit. Nice. Okay. Right. But that being said, I can,
how wonderful.
That was a huge gift, man. That was a huge gift. Yeah. And it was also a crazy reflection of, I had this, as I've kind of gone on this journey, one of my patterns is like really feeling uncomfortable around like unconscious people. Basically, which is like a childhood thing. And really not liking that experience. And, I was like, wow, look at me going to Costa Rica, running away, like going to these like secluded places. Like it was just a total reflection of the pattern in a really fascinating way.
So cool.
And avoiding just being in certain situations. So it was really, really interesting. So I'm so grateful for that, seeing clearly, but I also can say when I went to some of those places, I could just feel it in my system that it was like, yeah, this resonates. Like this is a yes.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a T chart of like, well, this is the good things and this is the bad things. It was just like, okay, yeah, this feels good.
I have a story about your second one. There was a time when I was really fucking did not like superficial conversations. Holy shit. Like, on that side of things, that you were saying about like unconscious, and I just like, nothing would drive me crazier than like two people talking for a half an hour over, how fast they drove to Santa Barbara and what they bought for lunch. It just drove me crazy. And at some point I realized, that's really driving me crazy. There's something here for me to learn. And so I started looking for those conversations to sit in on and be a part of, and like allow myself to have the emotional experience. It was awkward because there was a couple of them where like they're talking about lunch at like whatever, Chipotle, and I'm like crying because like there's so much grief in me about that kind of superficial relating due to my childhood. And there was like, I don't know, maybe like a little less than a month of that happening where I would just seek those conversations out until I could sit in love without judgment around those conversations. It was such a profound impact on my life to like sit in that. Now, granted, I wouldn't have moved to like some like, place where that was like the normal culture. That would have driven me nuts. But I did notice, there's this thing that I need to do to learn and to be able to be in love in those moments.
That's really cool. I give you a lot of props. It's almost like, this kind of exposure therapy when you notice one of these things is like a thing you can be exercised if you really want to embrace the intensity. I know one of those for me has been like around money, like just like I used to just freaking hate looking at my credit card bill.
Yeah.
Like I just it just was like, cause I was just like, fuck, like, where is all this money going? Like, how is it even possible? I don't even buy stuff for myself. Like, what's going on here? And just to like open up my online bank account and just sit in that, you know, and just be like, okay. And like, all right, like, you know, just keep doing that until it like wasn't a big deal to sign into the bank account. Yeah. And
beautiful work.
I think
that's great.
Thanks, man. I mean, it was probably a little easier than sitting in superficial conversations, but I don't know. I think there's just like a fascinating, like meta practice here that maybe some people can consider, right? If they really do find this kind of repetitive, just trigger pattern, whatever you want to call it, just maybe being intentional about your freedom.
Yeah, we call it embracing intensity. It's like looking for those moments, not creating them, but looking for those moments. And how do I welcome and embrace those things? Yeah, that's awesome. We actually just did we just did a workshop on it, like a free one for people, and had like 600 people sign up. It's unlike anything that we've ever had before. Really
wow. Fun. What do you attribute that to, that particular topic? Or
I think it's partially the topic, but I think partially it's I'm actually going on social media these days. I'm actually on Twitter, and we're starting a YouTube channel, and we're doing stuff besides the podcast. Yeah,
nice.
I think that's part of it. And we have a team now working, and it's really fun.
How do you? I see you on Twitter tweeting away. How do you feel about? How do you like that?
Oh, it's funny, on vacation this year, I decided the only thing I would do is Twitter, and I would only do it when I was enjoying it. So what I love about Twitter is it's fucking poetry. Like, to have answers like the one that that you just read, it's just like, to me, there's so much joy in that like level of poetry. And I also really appreciate, like, there's a lot of places to appreciate and be grateful in Twitter. Like, the people in the little corner of Twitter that I operate in, it's like people are generally, just curious, and they want to learn, and they're kind to one another. And so I really appreciate that part of it. And I like the interaction with folks. I notice that there's like some part, I don't like checking it, so I don't. And so I just kind of, when I'm on, I don't have any badges or anything. So it's just when I'm on it, I do it. And I don't do it when I'm not enjoying it. That's kind of my thing. And the other thing I really like about Twitter is, on that rare occasion when someone's just being an asshole and I get a little triggered by it, that's like a great moment, because then I'm like, oh, wait, so, like, what is that? Like, what's that thing inside of me that I can like how, what the fuck am I defensive about? This. And so that's really fun. That's only happened like once or twice, but really fun to have that happen.
Yeah. I think that's a really, I would say, a healthier way to look at social media, right? Is to use it in that way. I think I could probably do a little bit of that. I've been avoiding, I sometimes avoid it because I'm just like, I just hate some of this posturing. It's just like, who gives a fuck about this? But
I know I don't spend a lot of time reading. I have like a very small list of people I read. And then I try to grow it to be conscientious, but I don't really scroll because the signal to noise ratio is pretty horrible. Like, unless somebody recommends or I see something that's profound from a friend, that's really how I find people, because I can't deal with the amount of noise in the feed is just ridiculous.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. I'm like, wow, you can just look at all these assholes all day and just feel great about it. I'm like, good for you, man. But
no.
I think I understand how you use it a little bit better now.
I scroll it every once in a while to see if I can find somebody. And I can't do that for more than like 15 minutes. And that's pretty rare. But when I find somebody that I'm like, oh, that's good stuff, then I put them on my list. And that's what I look at.
Nice. Yeah. Nice. Well, I think I want to finish this with one question, and this is just personal curiosity. What are you excited about in your Lego building and playing? What are you most fired up about right now?
The YouTube channel. Yeah, the YouTube channel is. What happened was perfect example. So we've been doing a couple experiments on YouTube and not particularly liking them. And then we just I had a couple of people show up at my house who are involved in creating it. And we just sat around not let's get to work. We just kind of sat around and bullshitted and talked about the YouTube thing. And all of a sudden some ideas sprung to mind about the entire approach, which, I mean, I'm sure people who do this, we're just like, what if we just thought of really cool thumbnails instead of what do we want to let's just think of really cool thumbnails that we would just think were funny as fuck or, anything. And then when we did that, all of a sudden, everything came to life and we were all excited and we shot 5 teaching videos in the space of 2 hours. And and so all of a sudden something clicked and I'm just really proud of the work that we're doing in it. And we're all having a lot of fun doing it. And then recently I was like, oh, shorts. And I just did that, a similar thing with another group with shorts. And so now we just started doing those. And so it's really, really creative and really fun. And yeah, just a tremendous joy. There's a little bit of a dauntingness to the fact that videos and short videos and tweets and Instagram, that whole social media thing it's a lot, but man, it's so creative and so joyful and it's talking exactly about stuff I like talking about. So it's been that, but YouTube in particular has been really a cool thing for me. That's been really fun. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
As far as what I like building, yeah.
I love that, man. And yeah, from my limited exposure to YouTube-y people, you're spending your time in the right place, for better or for worse, the thumbnail is what gets you in the game. So if you like creating cool ones, that's a super high leverage activity.
It makes us think about the whole teaching differently. So the thing about it that's cool is one of my methods in teaching is take the question and flip it on its head for the answer, meaning that you don't assume the question is actually the question. So similarly, when you think about the question that guy wrote me, he said, surrender and ideas of being. So I question the the ideas of God or spirituality. And I'm I switch the idea that there could be an idea and I'm switching the idea of I'm the one surrendering. And the thumbnail actually allows us to do that because you can think of a thumbnail that's what? And then you can twist the whole teaching so that it's not what you expect, which is super fun for me.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. I like how Brett in your guys' podcast will just pose these questions that are just oh, what if, discovering who you are is more fun than getting what you want. Right. And it's always there's these little okay, made me think moments. So that's cool. I appreciate that you guys do that.
Yeah. Total
awesome.
Pleasure. Thanks
Joe,
for having me on. Hey, I look forward to having you at the masterclass. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun. And, hopefully for anybody that's listening, if you liked what you heard today, and you should definitely listen to the earlier episode we did together. We talked about business and spirituality, how they can work together. Come on board and join. I'm a huge fan of your work, Joe. I've learned a lot from you in the connections course and the podcast. And excited to go a little bit deeper in the masterclass. So I know Mattia is putting together kind of a special offer for my audience, and I'll be sending that out to everybody. So keep a lookout, and
Cool.
yeah, excited.
And in that one we have small groups. Like you'll be in a group of like 5 folks. So let us know who you want as part of your group, and we'll make sure that you all get together if you have some people you want to be together with. Yeah.
Appreciate that. Yeah, that's the plan, is to kind of like go on a journey together.
Cool.
So it'll be a lot of fun. And yeah, Joe, just thanks again, man. Love all the stuff you guys are doing. Always just an energizing, fun time to talk to you, and grateful for what you're doing in the world, man. Keep it up.
Pleasure. All right. Thank you. Bye.